Brought to you by Naturals to Go, the VIBEcast is your gateway to realizing your entrepreneurial dreams.
Hey folks, Linda Ballesteros here. Thanks so much for joining me today on VIBEcast. And we're going to have a great time today. I'm always honored when someone finds some time in their busy day to spend with me. So, because I know that we have so many plates spinning and we have so many things that we can spend our time on. So today, our guest is Ross Kramer, and Ross is the owner of Remarkable Vending Services. I love that name. And he's here to tell us a little bit how he turned his side hustle into a thriving business. So, Ross, thanks so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Linda.
Absolutely. So, tell me a little bit about your background, Ross, and what industry did you come out of?
Sure. So before I get into that, I heard you say that you loved the name Remarkable Vending Services.
Do
So
I
just a
do.
fun fact, my last name Kramer spelled backwards is Remark.
Look at you.
So
Aren't you
the
slick?
the branding there is just remarkable. So that was just a fun fact about where I came up with my business name.
I love that. Love that.
But yeah, to get back to your question, so my background has, ever since I graduated college, has always been kind of in the consumer packaged goods industry, whether it was retail. It's been a lot of retail, but then there was a lot of corporate job functions as well. So I grew up in the industry. I grew up managing assortment of products. I grew up managing pricing and following consumer trends and things like that. And uh, I don't know if I'm allowed to name, organizations that I work for, but I worked for Kroger, and most people across the United States know something about Kroger. They're one of the largest in the industry, doing what they do. I used to manage the snack portfolio for them, so snacks was something that I managed for several years. Learned a lot about it, followed those trends, and I thought, vending machines is a lot of snacks, it's a lot of beverage, and it just seemed like the right fit. Coming out of COVID, I think, is what really pushed me over the edge to get into this business. When COVID started, everybody went on lockdown, and my office went fully remote. And after a couple of years, I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to have that human interaction with people. Having that background of snacks and beverage, I thought that this would be the perfect fit. So I reached out to Naturals to Go and learned about their process, learned about the machines that they offer, went up to Buffalo, New York, got trained on more than just the machines. It was training on the entire industry, which I thought was fantastic. That Naturals to Go had a 2-day program for that. And then I jumped in with both feet.
Yeah, yeah. And did you realize that the vending machine business was as widespread as it is?
I think I did. That was also one of the reasons that I ultimately chose this path for my side business. I've always been an entrepreneur at spirit. I mean, ever since I was in high school, I was always coming up with ways to sell something or make something or fill a void. And COVID really gave me the time to investigate and research and look at different opportunities. Vending was at the top of the list. Managing a storage facility was on that list. Laundromats was on that list. And so I kind of had looked at all of these different things. And the one that was common between those three that I just mentioned was how fragmented of an industry it is. When you talk about how vast vending machines are, there's obviously your big players, the ones that are into universities or the ones that have, amusement parks and baseball fields. Those big companies manage a lot of machines. They have markets. They do concession. They do all that. But outside of that, vending is very fragmented. There are mom and pops who have one machine, two machines, 10 machines all over the country. And as I decided between the vending or the laundromat or, kind of the storage, the vending made the most sense because I found, or at least I believe that the easiest way to grow is through acquisition. And there are so many more mom and pops out there who probably they 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 have the motivation to start a business, but they don't have the discipline to stick with it. And, as a business guy, I mean, I hate to say it, but I wanted to take advantage of some of that, right? There's a lot of people out there who started a business, they got a couple machines, and then they get in over their head and they're looking to sell those. So I use that as an advantage for myself to find opportunities and build a portfolio of machines.
Well, and you make a really good point because there are people that have heard, oh, vending, it's got to be easy, right? You just put a few chips and granola bars and a few drinks in there, and that's all. But Ross, it's a business.
It is.
It doesn't matter what the widget is. I say this over and over again. It is a business. And if you don't manage it like a business, it's not going to be successful. So we were talking about the size of the vending machine business industry. There was a recent press release by NAMA. We were talking about the NAMA conference, and that's for those that don't know, it's the National Automatic Merchandising Association. Their research reveals that the U.S. convenience services industry, and that includes vending, generates more than 40 billion in annual economic impact. That is huge.
I didn't know it was that big.
It is huge and it is growing because, think about like even at the airports where you seldom actually deal with a person if you're just going to buy a bottle of water.
Mm.
It is all self checkout and that is all automated and it all begins with vending machines. So when we talk about the vending industry and your background and how you really are very well suited for this industry, there's got to have been ups and downs for you. There's got to have been those challenges along the way. Like I said, it's a business.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some of those bumps in the road. Have you experienced any of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm in my third year. So I feel like if I'd made it this far, there had to have been some ups and downs because that's really how you grow. The first one was so I didn't talk a whole lot about how fast I was able to grow. So when I started with Naturals to Go, like I had mentioned, I started with 5 machines and I really wanted to just kind of, dip my toe in the water, get these 5 machines placed, which, only took a couple of months. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I kind of liked that it was a slow burn at first. You kind of get 1 or 2 machines out there, you learn about it, you get your third one, you get your fourth, and you kind of spread that out. That way you're taking on a lot of these machines, slowly and you can learn. Well, it was about a little over a year ago was when I made my first acquisition and I acquired another operator who had 13 machines. I had 6 at that time. So I went from 6 to 19 overnight. And that was probably challenge number one. It was a huge change for how I was running my business. The machines that I had acquired were all high volume machines in comparison to the 5 or 6 that I had. And it happened to be right before schools let out for the summer. And the machine route that I ended up buying is in YMCA's here locally in Cincinnati. And during the summer months, they don't have concession stands. So they've got a lot of students, a lot of families that are going there for, to swim, to work out, basketball, different activities. And my vending machines are the sole resource for, beverages and snacks. So overnight, my business went from, 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds. But it was that discipline that I mentioned earlier, Linda, that got me through it because there were days, most days actually, I was waking up at 4 a.m. I was packing totes. I would run out, I'd fill machines. I have a day job, so I would, finish filling machines about 7:30. I'd have to change my shirt by then, come into the office, spend an 8-hour day and then go home, spend a little bit of time with the family, pack totes, fill machines until, the end of the day and just rinse and repeat. And so my business, that was challenge number one was just figuring out where I was going to find the time to keep these machines filled because of how high volume they were. But then the second one was my warehousing space. I was operating 5 or 6 machines just out of my house. I had beverages in the garage. I had snacks and stuff inside the house. to keep everything, weather safe and all that. I ran out of space very quickly. So I had to kind of reprioritize what I had, in the garage. I had to reprioritize what I had at the house so I could open up my space. And then the number one obstacle there is cardboard. No one ever talks about in this industry how much cardboard there is when you're managing a business of that size. It's a daily job managing the cardboard.
And there's got to be recycling that you can participate in, right?
Yes, there are. Yeah, actually, the local library has recycling bins there, so I make weekly trips up there and just fill up the vehicle. And but that's an easy one, right? Cardboard. No one really talks about it. That's an easy one to solve for. But waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and working until 11 o'clock at night, day after day after day, was not sustainable. I had the drive, I had the discipline and the motivation to do it. I wanted to be successful, but it was not sustainable. And I had a vacation, family vacation plan for about 8 weeks out. And I thought to myself, I've got to figure out a solution now, because there's no way I can take, 10 days off and let these machines just sit there. So fortunately for me, I've grown up in Cincinnati my entire life. I have family here. And so I was actually able to hire on one of my nieces. She was a junior in high school at the time. She was, she had been driving for 6 to 8 months at that point, but she was very busy as well and couldn't really hold a job because of the hours. Most of your typical, W-2 jobs, if you will, are, you got to work a 4-hour shift or a 6-hour shift. You're working in the evenings and on the weekends. And, for my niece, she was in sports and she had different things going on. So it was very challenging for her to manage a work schedule, a sports schedule, school schedule, all those kinds of things. So the vending was super flexible, especially with my locations. They open up at 5 a.m. and they close at 9 p.m. So it was very flexible for her to go fill machines based on her schedule. If she only had 2 hours on a day or a 4-hour day, or some of my machines are within, 5-10 minutes of the house. So it made it very easy for me to bring on some help based on the flexibility. And then I ended up bringing on a second niece as well. So at one point I had 3 employees. I'm back down to 2 employees now. But that is what, treating it like a business. That's what I needed. Plus now I can spend my time looking for new locations, better locations. Some of those other ups and downs are repairs. Some of the machines that I had acquired were a few years older than the original 5 that I had purchased from Naturals to Go. So they needed some repair, they needed some extra work. So it allowed me to focus on the assortment side, the pricing side, finding new locations, while my nieces filled the machines.
Well, it definitely sounds like you have grown with your business, and it's all about being flexible, but it's all about staying on top of it as well, because a business can change very quickly. And if you don't stay on top of those nuances,
Yeah.
then you could lose a location. So I know that you said you have a lot of machines at different YMCAs. Tell me about how you manage your relationship with them and how you make sure that you are taking care of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I did when I acquired that route, it was majority, those 13 machines I acquired, the majority of those were in YMCAs. But a couple of them were in non-YMCA. So I have a balance between YMCA locations and non-YMCA locations. One of the first things that I had done when I acquired this YMCA was, first of all, introduction to all the locations. There's 9 YMCAs. So I wanted to make sure that I built a business relationship with each of those 9 locations. So that was step number 1. I understood what some of their needs were, and I was actually able to take 2 of my lower performing machines that I had and move them into some of the higher volume, well, into like the medium volume YMCAs. And so now they have 2 machines instead of just the 1 machine at a handful of those locations. That showed the YMCAs that I was willing to invest in their business. which it really wasn't even an investment. I already had the machines. They were just at a low performing location. So the YMCA initially was like, okay, we got a new owner. Now he's investing in us, bringing in some new machines, managing them in that format. But then you mentioned earlier, Linda, it's a business. I had to treat it as such. And knowing that I've got a lot of my eggs in this basket that's called the YMCA, I can't afford to lose this business. If they were to call me tomorrow and say, hey, we no longer need your services, I wouldn't know what to do with the 13 machines that I've got in their locations, plus all the inventory that I manage for them. So I sought out a contract. So I actually just signed that contract a few months ago. We established a 2-year contract with a right to extend, and in exchange for that, I give them a donation towards their annual fund. So it's win-win for both of us. They need this annual fund money in order to provide all the services that they provide. But then I now know that they're not going to just call me tomorrow and say, hey, we no longer need your services. So I had to treat it like a business. I had to protect it. And so now I feel like I can move forward with the relationships that I've created, the service that I'm providing, and then knowing that it's a guaranteed business for at least the next 2 years.
Yeah, I do love that approach, Ross, because there are times that I've seen some of our operators forget that it's a relationship business. Forget that it's that they're providing a service to this location and just making sure that they're happy. Building those relationships with those individuals definitely makes a big difference in your business. I don't care what business you're in. It's all about building relationships, isn't it?
It is, Linda, and if you don't mind, I'd like to expand on that because when I first, a year ago when I took this business on and I was working, 17, 18 hours a day, I lost track of that relationship on the original locations that I have. I mean, this managing the new route, managing the YMCA's became such a focus for me that I pulled my focus away from some of those other locations that I had. Now, I didn't lose any locations through it, but that was part of why I realized I needed to bring on some help because then it'll get me back to that relationship side. And actually, one of my locations that I had kind of lost track of, if you will, that individual ended up leaving and he went to a new company, and that new company is actually a larger company. And I was able to get that relationship back. Now I don't have any vending at that new location, but I have a contact there. Should an opportunity come up where I have a machine that I need to get placed, I can reach out to him. So it isn't always about the relationship of where you have the machine, but the relationship of where that person may go in the future. And so you can't burn bridges. You may have a low performing location and you might think to yourself, oh, it's not worth my time to manage that relationship. It just kind of sits there and does its thing. But what you don't realize is it's your business and you are the face of that business, and there are employees there that could leave and go elsewhere, and you don't want to burn any bridges ever. And hopefully if you have relationships with the employees, maybe there's an opportunity for a future location when they move.
Well, and there's also that's a really good point, and there's also that opportunity of that employee that you have a relationship with offering a referral to
Yeah.
you. Maybe his wife works or his best friend works someplace. So it's still all about building relationships,
Agreed.
especially if you're wanting to expand your business. Now,
Yeah.
you talked about how quickly you had grown your business in the last few years. So tell me, what does it look like for the next 2 to 3 years for you? What does that
Yeah.
expansion and growth look like?
Well, the biggest challenge with that growth, Linda, is my wife. Just getting into the business from day one, she wasn't a huge supporter, but she knew that it was something I wanted to do. So she supported that, but it was tough. And I think now with where I've been able to grow my current business, I've, I'm probably at about a 50 to 60% replacement of my corporate income. So future for me is to replace my corporate income completely and move on to vending 100% or vending and other business opportunities. I think I want to leave myself open to, I mentioned earlier, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. So I think there are other opportunities out there. vending is obviously going to be the foundation of that. It's something that I feel like I'm good at. I've got a good route. I've got a 2-year contract. So I think if I were able to get just a little bit more expansion, and start to replace that corporate income, for me, it would be leaving the corporate world, doing it all on my own, but then looking at other avenues within vending, like, you and I talked one time about micro markets. The micro markets is, I think, the future of this whole vending or this convenience space. There's a lot of opportunities there. So for me, I'm going to get through this summer. This is going to be a busy summer for me with school being out. Build a little bit of capital, and then, hopefully for this coming winter is to really, put pen to paper and figure out what that next plan looks like, or at least how quickly I feel like I can pull that trigger.
Yeah, it sounds to me like what has helped you with the expansion is just adding some employees, even if it's just part-time. It
Yeah.
relieves you enough so that you don't have to be the snack guy. You
Right.
can actually be the business owner.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. I think that's true for every business that's been successful. There's only so much resource that you have with your own time when you're trying to manage a corporate job or manage a family, or manage different things. You only have so much time, and if you just get stuck into a pattern of managing the machines, you're never really going to have the time to grow. So I definitely encourage other operators out there to uh, seek additional help. Hire high school talent. They're more than capable of doing a job like this, and I think the flexibility of the job makes it enticing for them, and then it opens up your time to expand.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice there. So we're coming down to the end of today's show. Rose, if someone is listening, maybe they have a corporate job and they're wanting to seek maybe the an opportunity to have a side hustle, to start something on the side that is scalable. What kind of advice would you give them when they're just thinking about it? They just now are mulling it over and having some discussions. So, what would you advise them?
Um, you know, uh, this wouldn't necessarily be my own advice. I'm stealing this advice from other people that I've been inspired by. But don't be perfect. There's been a lot of CEOs that have had the same methodology. You're never going to get something perfect, and then you can move forward from there. There's this idea that everybody wants to get everything perfect, right? I need to get the right assortment. I need to figure this out. I need to figure that out. I got to get a location. I got to get a machine. You don't have to get everything all at once in order to pull that trigger. Once you feel like this is what you want to do, figure out a few things and then go. You got to obviously have a little bit of capital, or a little, some kind of investor or something. Don't go in over your head. I mean, I would never, recommend anybody take on such a huge amount of debt that they could never figure out. But it is a business, it's an investment, and it's, in some cases, it's it's a risk, and that's really what it is. So you've got to be able to take that risk and just do it. That was kind of where I was at, several years ago. I'd had the conversations with my family. I'd had the conversations with my wife. I was in a spot where I felt like I could do it, but I just needed that push. And I realized I don't need a push. I just need to go. And so that's where I called Naturals to Go. They walked me through the rest. They filled in a ton of gaps. One of the things that Naturals to Go provided that um, I really looked for was the location services. I knew how to manage assortment. I knew how to manage, beverage and snacks. I'm handy, so I felt like I could, service machine or give it repairs. What I didn't feel like I was good at was the door to door, cold calling, walking into some office building and saying, "Hey, I want to put a vending machine here." I didn't feel like that was where my expertise was. So Naturals to Go provided that for me. And that was all I needed to do, was put what I believed I had with what I believed I didn't have, where I could, get that from Naturals to Go, and we just moved forward, and then I haven't looked back since.
So, do you feel more confident today in finding locations for yourself now that you've been in the business for a few years?
I absolutely do because I know more about the machines. I've met so many people along the way. When you're filling machines, you have little kids come up to you have teenagers come up to you have adults come up. So you have an opportunity to just talk to people and you learn about what it is that they get out of a vending machine, what assortment they like, what they don't like. And so I can take all of those experiences where they may just seem like, cordial conversations while I'm filling a machine. It's actually research. That's market research. And so now when I go to places, that may be affluent or not so affluent or wherever that case may be, or if it's a clientele that's older or clientele that's younger, I can now speak to, the owner of that location and say, hey, I've got the right assortment to fit your demographic, or I've got the right assortment or the right schedule or the right help. So I absolutely have a lot more confidence to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, I love that because I don't care what business you go into, a lot of it is just OJT, on the
Yeah,
job training, right?
that's right.
And you figure it out as you go along. But just like you mentioned earlier, you just have to stay in the game. It's about dedication, determination. It's just sticking with it that makes it
It's the
successful.
discipline. Yeah, you have to stay
Mhm,
disciplined for sure.
mhm.
For sure.
100%. Ross, thanks so much for joining us today. I loved hearing about your story. I can't wait to touch base with you in a couple of years and see how you've grown. So, thanks again for being with us today and much luck to you.
Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. So, folks, I always leave you with a quote. This one is a Richard Branson quote. A big business starts small, just like Ross said today. He started with 5 machines, now he has 19. Start small and grow. Thanks so much for joining me today on VibeCast. And until we'll see you next time, live the vibe.
That's a wrap for this episode of the VIBEcast. We hope you've been inspired and empowered on your entrepreneurial journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on all your favorite platforms to stay connected with the Vibe community.